What's up guys, this is Voxside and welcome to another After Effects tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be using Trapcode Particular to generate these neon swirls or trails that sort of wrap around a text, and you don't need to use text necessarily. You can use a logo, preferably a wide logo, but you can also adjust the trails to fit any kind of logo or text. So I will be including these project files, and if you follow the link in the description of this video, it will take you to the page where you can download the project files. And yeah, we can go ahead and get started. Let's create a new comp. I will name this main comp, and this is full HD, so 1920 by 1080, and duration will be 10 seconds and frame rate for 30. Hit OK. Let's go ahead and create a new layer, so Ctrl Y for new solid, rename this to background, and let's go ahead and add a effect, generate ramp. And let's switch this to a radial ramp, and for my first color I'm just gonna use a nice violet, and for my second color let's use a black. Let's spread these colors out a bit, and I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this background layer, and I'll change this violet color for this duplicate to a light blue, and I'll set this layer to add and grab my pen tool and just create a mask over on this corner. And then if I feather this guy, so press F for feather and just feather this out, now I'm pretty much adding another light source to our scene, which isn't really a light source but more like a fake light source, but this just adds a bit of variety to our background, so it's not 100% violet and black. Alright, and this should be fine. Let's go ahead and add our text. So I'll go ahead and type neon trails, and as the font I'm using Accent, which is available on thefont.com, and I can rescale this if I need. And let's grab this layer and press V for my selection tool, grab this layer, and if I go ahead and hold Ctrl and Shift while repositioning, this will snap our layer to center and just make sure that everything is nice and centered. And let's go ahead and pre-compose this layer, so Ctrl Shift C, and I'll rename this to text holder, just so we can use a pre-composition, so if whenever I need, I can go back and rechange this text to whatever I want and update in the original main comp. Alright, and for our text holder, let's go ahead and add a solid, so that's Ctrl Y, and make sure the solid is white. Go ahead and add a transition linear wipe effect, and set a keyframe for 100% transition completion at the beginning of our timeline. And if I press U to show my keyframe information, I can go ahead and let's go maybe to the 5-second mark and add another keyframe for 0%. And now I can change the wipe angle on the other side and maybe use a value of an angle of 270, and also increase the feather a bit. And now I can use this layer as a mask for our text, and if I set our text layer to be Luma Matte for my white solid, now this is using the white solid as a mask and creating this nice transition. Alright, and I can change these keyframes now to increase or decrease the animation of the reveal. And let's go back in our main comp and let's set this to add, and also add a nice glow to this, and maybe increase the radius for this. I can also maybe go ahead and if I press T for opacity, let's set the opacity to maybe 70%, and I will go ahead and add an expression for this opacity property. So Alt and left click this stopwatch to add an expression, and expression will be wiggle, that's double G, and let's use for my first value, which will be the frequency, and I'm gonna use a value of 8 for frequency maybe, so 8 comma, let's try maybe for our amplitude 50. Alright. So the first value will determine how fast this will flicker in this case, since I'm using the opacity value, and the flicker amount, so the intensity, will be determined by our second value, which is 50 in this case. So the resulting animation will be sort of like this flickering animation that just will help set the mood for a neon reveal. Let's go ahead and grab a camera now, and this will have an angle view of 90 degrees, and hit OK. Let's go ahead and add a null object, and I will rename this null object to cam target, Let's make this a 3D layer. So I pressed F4 and I can set this layer to be 3D. Let's parent the camera to our cam target. And now if I also make this text holder a 3D layer, I can go ahead to my cam target, and if I press R, and let's go for our X rotation. Now you can see I have better control over the camera, and I can start creating our original camera animation. So, but I'll be doing this later. Let's set up our light emitter for now, and let's go ahead and add a new layer, solid, or actually rather layer light. And for my light, I will rename this to emitter with a capital E and hit OK. So it's very important that you rename this light layer to emitter. Alright, so hit OK, and this will be fine. Let's go ahead and add another null object. Set the null object to be a 3D layer, and I will rename this to helper. And this helper null over here will be used to sort of create that swirly animation using this light, and I'll show you what I mean. So I will parent now this emitter layer to our helper null, and if I go to my emitter settings and press P for position, I can set these now to 0, 0, and 0. And now this will just place our light right in the center of our scene and right on top of our null. And I will go ahead to my text holder, and let's go to material options, and let's disable accept lights and shadows. And now if I go in my costume view, you can see here we have right in the center of our scene, we have our helper null and our emitter null. And now with the position for my emitter, let's actually go ahead and this position property, I'll right click and choose separate dimensions. And if I adjust the Y position for this light, and now go to my rotation of the helper null, so press R, you can see as I increase the X rotation, we're starting to create these swirls that were shown in the original preview. Alright, so this will be our setup for the light emitter. And let's set this back to 0, and let's press P for position. And I will also right click this position and choose separate dimensions, and I want to animate this null from one side of the text to the other side. So let's go to our X position and drag this over to the other side of the text, so maybe somewhere around this part. Alright, and add a keyframe for X position at the start of our timeline. Let's go maybe to 5-second mark, and let's drag this over to the other side, and this will just automatically create a keyframe. So this is the animation so far, and now all I need to animate is the X rotation. And instead of animating this with keyframe, I'll just use an expression, and the expression will be time multiplied by, let's try maybe a value of 750. Alright, so now this automatically animates our rotation, and the resulting animation will be this. And I can also animate the Y position for this emitter, so I can add a keyframe to maybe the 1 second mark or 1.05, and let's add a keyframe to where it's at, and go to the beginning of my timeline and add another keyframe for 0, so this is for the Y position. And now our light swirls will sort of grow as the animation progresses. And let's maybe add another keyframe for the Y position, and maybe towards the end, so around this part, I'm gonna set this back to 0, and let's create some, let's adjust these keyframes and just maintain some consistency between them. Alright, so let's add our particular layer now. So Control Y, and let's rename this to particular. And let's go ahead and add effect, Trapcode, particular, and let's go to emitter and set this to be a lights emitter. And for my velocity, I'm gonna set all of these settings to 0. And particular doesn't work with the costume view, so we're gonna have to go in our active camera view. And this is the resulting animation. And if I increase the particles per second, now you can see we're starting to get our original effect. And I also want to stop generating particles at around this part. So I can go ahead to my light layer, press T for intensity, set a keyframe for 100%, move over a few keyframes. And if I set this to 0, now our particles will stop generating because it's using the value of the intensity for our light emitter. Alright, so there's only one problem, is that you can see our swirls sort of have these jaggy angles between them. Alright, let's take a look over here. So over the course of these two frames, our lights, because they're moving so fast, is jumping from this position to this position, and particular pretty much doesn't know how to fill in the gaps. So from this position to this position, it doesn't know to complete this as a perfect circle. All right, and this is mainly because the rotation is too fast, and you can either slow down your animation for the light, or you can simply increase the frame rate. And we're gonna do that. So if you go to your composition settings, you can set the frame rate to be something like 90, okay? And if you hit OK, and let's preview a frame. Alright, so now you can see that gets rid of our jaggy edges, and there still is some jagginess between the frames, but it's not really as noticeable. Alright, so our next step will be to add a texture to our particles. So let's go ahead and create a new composition, and let's name this to texture 1. And for width I will use 50 and height 250. Alright, and let's go ahead and create a new solid, so Ctrl Y, and I will just double click this ellipse tool to create my new mask. And let's grab this mask and hold Ctrl and just scale this down a bit, and maybe press F to feather this out, and press T for opacity, and also maybe give this a 50% opacity. And now I will grab my ellipse tool again, and let's maybe add right in the center of our composition. I'm gonna click while holding Ctrl and Shift, and this will just create a perfect circle. And let's drag this out a bit and give it some size. Let's place this circle right at the top of our ellipse shape, so somewhere around this position. And I will go ahead and add a repeater to this shape. And for the repeater settings, I can go inside the transform for the repeater, set the first value for the position to be 0, and then just increase the second value, so the Y value, and also give this just 2 copies. Alright, so increase this until we mirror this over to the other side of our ellipse shape. And this will be fine. And let's go back inside our main comp. Let's drop our texture 1 inside the composition, and I will hide this layer. Let's go to particular, and let's go to particle, and let's set the particle type to texture polygon colorize. Alright, and for my texture I'm gonna use the first layer, which is the texture that we've just created, and this will be the result. And let's set the opacity to maybe 25%, and maybe decrease the particles per second. And if I go inside my rotation settings for the particle, I can go ahead and increase the rotate Z value, and you can see as I increase this, we are sort of realigning our particles, and I need to use a value of 90 degrees. So I'm sort of just flipping the rotation of our particle sprites, and this will be fine for now. Let's also go to our size over life, and I'm just going to create a curve over here right in the beginning to sort of fade our particles in, like so. And I can also click smooth a few times, just make sure this ramp here is smooth. And if I go to my opacity over life, I'm just going to use this preset over here, and this will just fade our particles out towards the end. And now we're sort of getting the effect that we want. And now I will actually go ahead in my texture 1, and I'm gonna grab this shape layer and Ctrl Shift C to pre-compose this, and I'm gonna rename this to texture underscore 2. And I will cut this layer, so Ctrl X, go in our main comp and paste this layer here, so Ctrl V, and let's hide this layer again. And now I can duplicate this layer of particular, and I will actually solo this layer for a bit. And for my texture for this duplicate, I'm gonna use the new texture, so texture underscore 2. And now if I also solo this layer, now you can see I have a separate control over the edges and the fill part, alright? And now let's give these particle layers some color. And if I press F4, I'm gonna set both of these to add. And let's unsolo these layers. And let's go to our first layer, and I'm gonna set this color to be maybe a violet. Alright, and for my second color, I'm gonna set this to be a blue. And for my second layer, now that I have individual control, I can increase the opacity for this. And let's set the transform mode to add, and do the same for my original particular layer. So set this guy to add. And also I want these particular layer to interact with our text layer. And so what I mean by this is that I want to use the text layer as an obscuration layer. So let's go ahead and let's solo this guy for a bit. And if I go to my visibility tab, I can go to obscuration layer, and I will choose this guy to be our text holder comp. Right, so now you can see that it's creating this nice obscuration. So now our particles are properly intersecting with the text layer. And let's do the same for this other particular layer. So go to visibility and set the obscuration layer to be text holder comp. Alright, let's go ahead, and for the second particular layer, I'm gonna go ahead and add a glow. And I will duplicate this glow, and let's increase the radius for this guy and increase the threshold, maybe increase the threshold here as well. And here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna duplicate this layer again, and for this duplicate I will set the size to be maybe 7.5, and I'm gonna make the color for this to be also a violet. And I'm gonna duplicate this layer below it again, so the blue guy. Place this on top, and let's set the size for this to be 10. So I'm just using the different layers to create and offset these streaks. All right. Maybe we can set the opacity for these guys to 50%, and also for this guy to 50%. Alright, and if I go in my texture layer, so my texture 2 layer actually, let's go back in our main comp. So let's go to our texture 2 comp. I can grab this shape layer, and if I press U twice to give my options, I can set the size to be maybe 10. And if I go in my main comp, now our streaks are a little thinner. And let's go ahead and also create our camera animation. So let's go to our cam target. I'm gonna use the Y rotation. Alright, so set the keyframe for 0 at second 5. And let's go to the beginning of our animation and set another keyframe. And let's turn this around a bit. And I will also add a animation for the position for my cam target. So press P for position. Let's split this into separate dimensions. And in the same spot, I'm gonna add another keyframe for our Z position, and just maybe make this closer to our camera in the beginning. Let's go to maybe 6 seconds, and I will push this into Z. So set this to maybe a negative value, and just push this out a bit. And let's press U for my keyframe information, grab all of these keyframes and press F9 to smooth this out. And this should be fine for now. Let's also go ahead and I will make a new layer and rename this to Ambient Particles. And I'm gonna actually grab my camera and my cam target layers, Control D to duplicate, and let's drag this over to the top. And now I will also grab this Ambient Particles layer and Control Shift C to pre-compose, and let's rename this to Ambient Particles. And I will place this new layer right above our background layers, so over here, and set this to add. And let's go inside this layer now, and for my Ambient Particles I'm gonna go ahead and add a Trapcode particular. Let's go to Emitter and set this to be a box emitter. I'll set the velocity to maybe 15. And let's spread these out a bit. So I'm holding shift as I'm dragging out these values. And let's actually set the size Y to be smaller. Drag this out in the X size. And for my particles, let's go and make this smaller. So maybe a scale of 2. Increase the size random. And maybe increase the life to 6. And then let's go in our emission extras and set the pre-run to 100. So I already want particles on the screen at the beginning of our animation. Let's maybe set the velocity to 5. And let's go to opacity over life, and let's use this preset over here that will just fade out our particles. And maybe if I go inside my camera, I can go to my camera options and turn on depth of field. And let's increase the aperture and maybe decrease the focus distance, or maybe increase. Let's just try to find a nice balance here. This should be fine. Let's go back inside our particle layer, and for my color I want to set this to be random from gradient. And for my gradient I'm gonna use this preset over here from black to white. And for my first color I'm gonna use this nice violet, and for my second color I'm just gonna use a nice blue. Alright, and I will now duplicate this layer, and for the second layer I'm gonna set the size to be maybe 1.2. And I will spread this other layer out on the Y position. And let's set the particles per second to half, so maybe 50. And so I want this nice concentration of particles here in the middle. And just fill out some of these other areas as well with my second particular layer. So these will be our ambient particles, and let's go back inside our main comp. Alright, so this is looking good. And the one final thing that I did in the original example is actually if you go to your project window, and this is our main comp, and if I grab this main comp composition, I can then drag this into a new comp. And for this new comp I can rename this, let's say maybe to our render comp, and I will set the frame rate for this guy to be 30, right, which is our original frame rate. And this works the same now, it has the same timing, but this will render out at 30 frames per second. And you can also go ahead, and if you enable time remapping for this layer, you can go ahead and let's grab a keyframe here for where our text ends. We can go ahead and actually just grab this last keyframe and just drag this over, maybe let's say to around the 4-second mark. And this will just speed up our entire animation. Alright, and I can also grab these keyframes and press F9. And if I go in my graph editor, I can also readjust the timing for this animation here, so I can readjust the handles and speed things up or slow things down. And you can have a lot of control over the speed of your animation this way. And let's say now that this composition lasts only for 4 seconds, I can go ahead and just trim comp to work area. Now we can make a quick ramp review and see what we have. So this is the resulting animation. And I probably need to readjust some of these keyframes a bit so it's not as fast and abrupt. But you can go ahead and check out the original project files and see exactly how I set things up there. But that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching so far. Don't forget to drop a like if you learned anything new, subscribe and stay tuned for more tutorials, and I'm out.